Welcome back to the Play by Play podcast YouTube channel. I am back home in Albuquerque for spring break. And even though I'm in a new location, I guess some things just never change. And I guess what I have to start learning is I need to keep my mouth shut. I need to stop talking. I need to stop talking trash about Sean Payton, George Payton, the Broncos organization. I think it was literally only like 4 days ago where I put out that video of just ranting about the Denver Broncos not making any moves during the offseason. And, I can admit that at the time, I still did have the right to make that video because the Broncos were an AFC Conference Championship level team that were arguably one injury, one fractured slash broken ankle away from making it to the Super Bowl. And they were in some type of way sitting on their hands when it came to signing free agents and improving their team. What I didn't know is that there was so much more happening behind the scenes, so many more big time moves happening behind the scenes with the Denver Broncos. And that came out earlier this morning when the Denver Broncos traded for Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver from the Miami Dolphins. The official details of the trade was Jaylen Waddle and a fourth-round pick from this year to the Denver Broncos. And in return, the Broncos sent over their first-round pick from this year, 30th overall, their third-round pick, and also their fourth-round pick as well. So virtually, because I think it's only a nine-pick swap within the fourth round. So virtually, it's Jaylen Waddle for a first-round pick and a third-round pick for the Denver Broncos. And to say that this surprised me would be an understatement, not just because I thought the Denver Broncos were sitting on their hands during free agency, but also because this was a move that I thought was going to happen months ago. This was a big time realistic move that we were talking about prior to the trade deadline last season. And I was really, really disappointed that back then that the Broncos weren't able to pull that deal off, because I thought that Jaylen Waddle would be able to give the perfect compliment to Courtland Sutton, would give the perfect push to an offense that just seemingly needed more playmakers, especially with Evan Ingram having the inability to really fit into Sean Payton's offense. I felt that we just need a little bit more for Bo Nix to be able to make that big time push. And we still, even without Jaylen Waddle at the time, we're still able to make the conference championship game. But that was something that I felt was going to happen at the trade deadline. And with it not happening then, with the fact that the Broncos have been in rumors with a lot of different other names, such as A.J. Brown, for example, I felt that Waddle, with Tyreek Hill leaving the Miami Dolphins and Waddle pretty much becoming their de facto number one target within the passing game, and them now signing Malik Willis, I did not believe that that deal was realistic anymore for Denver and even for Miami. I didn't believe that Miami could really afford giving Waddle away when you sign somebody who you believe could be your franchise quarterback going forward. But Sean Payton, George Payton, they continue to surprise me. They continue to just fulfill all of the doubts that I have and take away all the doubts that I have, because they were able to make this move. And in my opinion, this was the best move that you could have made. This is the perfect number 2 wide receiver, potentially even number 1 wide receiver that you could plug into this offense. And there's a million different reasons why. First of all, talking on what the Broncos gave up within this deal, none of these assets that they gave up realistically concern me. Yes, a first-round pick is a hefty, hefty price, no matter if it's number 1 overall, no matter if it's 30 overall. I understand. But I have been saying this for the past couple of months on every single football offseason move type video that I have done. This year's NFL draft is poor. It lacks a ton of depth. It lacks a ton of depth in a lot of positions that Denver is looking to improve in, wide receiver being one of them, running back as well, tight end potentially. There wasn't really a clean fit guy that Denver could have realistically picked at number 30 overall. They would have either had to trade up for somebody that they really wanted, which would have them trading some of the assets that they potentially gave up for Jaylen Waddle to trade up for somebody that they would have to develop or they would have to hope to would be able to play up to a championship caliber level on day one. They would have either had to done that or they would have had to bet to get extremely, extremely lucky for a handful of players to drop for them. They would have had to gotten extremely lucky for Kenyon Sadiq to fall to 30th overall. They would have had to get extremely lucky for the injury history of Jordan Tyson to just completely tout his draft stock in the name of, the 29, 28 other teams that are ahead of them for him to fall to number 30. Or they would have had to take a shot on somebody or pick somebody that realistically is not going to play very much. They would have had to take a shot on somebody like Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt. They would have had to take in CJ Allen out of Georgia, who realistically isn't going to play a ton because you just re-signed both Justin Strnad and Alex Singleton, who are big-time veteran players who have played in championship-level games, who know the defensive system so well of Vance Joseph. That is not going to benefit you right now. And even if you do pick CJ Allen, he does end up working out. The offense was definitely the weakness and the Achilles heel of this Denver roster going next year. So I'm not very concerned about the assets that Denver gave up because I don't think that any of those assets that they gave up are going to be as good as Jaylen Waddle is, at least right now. That's first and foremost, which Denver is a contending team. They want to win right now. A 20, 21, 22-year-old rookie is not realistically going to help them unless it is a generational type talent that is going to be able to be a Pro Bowl level player day one. Outside of that, Jaylen Waddle is the guy that you need in that. But the other reasons why I love this deal is because Waddle is proven. Waddle he had 3 straight seasons. His first 3 seasons in the NFL, he was an over 1,000-yard recorded receiver. He would have reached 1,000 yards this past year had he played the full 18-game season, which the past 2 years, I think he's missed about 3 games with a couple of nagging injuries, but overall, there hasn't been too much concern with them. He's been a consistent, high-level target on that Miami Dolphins offense. But the other reason is the fact that what I mentioned earlier, because to me, he is the perfect complement to Courtland Sutton within that wide receiver room. Sutton is much more like, if we're trying to make past comparisons, I would likely compare Jaylen Waddle to Emmanuel Sanders coming in from the Pittsburgh Steelers over to the Denver Broncos. And I would say that Courtland Sutton is a little bit more of what Demaryius Thomas was for those 2010s Broncos teams. A taller, bigger, much more physical presence on the outside. Somebody who works a lot better within the vertical passing game. Bo Nix threw it up to Courtland Sutton a ton of times. And just being able to fight for that ball when it's in the air and even, create yards with his legs after that catch. Maybe doesn't have, certainly the top speed and acceleration that Demaryius Thomas has, but still has some ability to be able to outrun certain defensive backs within the secondary. Jaylen Waddle, meanwhile, is a lot more like Emmanuel Sanders. A little bit smaller, a little bit thinner on his frame, a lot quicker, and somebody who operates a lot better in, say, the screen pass game, in the horizontal passing game, being thrown the ball over the middle of the field in 5 to 10 yard slant or drag situations, and being able to grab a lot of yards after the catch with his legs because of that speed that he presents. And having that introduced into your offense at the high level that is, because Marvin Mims can do some of those things, but not to the high level of Jaylen Waddle and not to the scoring ability that Jaylen Waddle has within that passing game. What that also does for Denver is it takes a lot of the pressure and the eyes off of Courtland Sutton and allows to get Sutton open a lot more, which should be fun as well. But the other thing, and one thing that I'm also really interested to see and why I wanted Denver to sign another wide receiver so badly, is now you have Sutton, you have Waddle, and now you get to move Marvin Mims into that slot position. Mims to me was probably one of the more underrated wide receivers in the league last year. He had a lot of big time moments for the Broncos, especially in clutch time. When I remember that Giants game at the end of the game when they were trying to get into field goal range, where Nix threw it, you know, outside corner, going towards the sidelines to Mims twice in a row, and he was able to go up and make those big time grabs. We obviously know the big time touchdown that he had in the AFC Conference Championship game with Jarrett Stidham throwing to him down the field. Mims can make some plays, and you have big time eyes on both Sutton and Waddle on the outside, and you throw a vertical deep threat like Mims on the inside going up the seam. That could be dangerous, and that could allow Mims to grow even more into the role that I think he is more stereotypically wanted for. I don't think that he is a natural outside receiver. Putting him on that inside, utilizing that speed, utilizing a little bit of that intelligence that he has shown also to be able to get within the gaps of those zones, that is going to be dangerous within the zone. Then, of course, you're also adding depth to your wide receiver room, right? Behind those three guys, you have Troy Franklin, you have Pat Bryant, who two in each of their own have shown some pretty bright moments, especially Pat Bryant, who in that AFC divisional game, especially against the Buffalo Bills, was going wild within that first drive that the Broncos had before obviously exiting with some injury. LaJordan Humphrey had a lot of really solid moments for the Broncos last year as well. So you have Sutton, you have Waddle, you have Mims, you have Franklin, you have Bryant, you have LaJordan Humphrey, especially a wide receiver room that dealt with a lot of injuries last year and also dealt with a lot of drop balls. You now have so many bodies and so many names to look to that you can now create a consistent rotation and begin to find the guys to really fill out that roster. It's not just about, what it brings to Bo Nix within the playmaking game. That's obviously the most important, don't get me wrong, but it's also what you can do down ballot, or rather down roster, to improve your depth there in case of injury, and especially taking the eyes over these smaller guys like Mims, like Pat, that haven't grown their name enough to allow them to grow, to allow them to develop, and to allow them to get more reps, because there's going to be so much focus on those two guys on the outside. And you add that into the fact that if you're the Denver Broncos, you are praying and hoping that you can at least get 10 to 12 games of just an efficient J.K. Dobbins at the running back spot. If they could try to figure out a way, I'm sure that this is going to be an emphasis for both Sean Payton and Davis Webb going forward. If they can try to find a way to get Evan Ingram involved in that offense consistently, that now becomes one of the scariest offenses in the league, not just in the AFC West, not just in the AFC, one of the scariest offenses in the league. You have a top-level offensive line. You get Evan Ingram involved. You have Sutton and Waddle on the outside. J.K. Dobbins healthy in the backfield. There's a couple of things that need to go your way there, but if they do, this offense is going to be really, really difficult to stop. And you combine with the fact that you are coming in with a little bit weaker of a defense. You don't have, the same coaching personnel that you had last season, but you still have a lot of big-time talent, especially in the secondary with the depth that you pulled out there. You still have two veteran inside linebackers that know the system very well. You have your pass rushers on the outside with Benito and Cooper and potentially Jonah Ellis filling in if he's able to come back to Denver and if they are able to find some common ground. You still have some solid depth on that defensive line. You have guys like Zach Allen. You have Malcolm Roach. You have DJ Jones. You have Uzaruke. You have a lot of still really, really solid names. You're suddenly starting to have trouble finding weaknesses within this Broncos roster. And especially with the fact that the Raiders are taking probably another year or two to rebuild. They're going to be having a rookie quarterback. The Chargers have been dealing with injury. The Chiefs are likely going to be without Mahomes for at least, half or maybe even majority of the season. All of a sudden, the Broncos' wheels begin to turn. They become even more favorites within that division, and then they can begin working to what Sean Payton talks about, which is getting the highest seed possible, being within the top two, potentially even number one. You have home field advantage. I'm getting ahead of myself, but all that I'm saying is that this was a brilliant, brilliant move for Denver. It was the right guy to get. I love A.J. Brown. I love some of the stuff that he does, but it seems like he has some troubles within the locker room. It seems like he has some motivation or attitude issues. It seems to the fact that he is not as consistent as he could be. Waddle, to me, is that. He fits him perfectly. There's guys on the roster that he knows, Pat Surtain, especially from being at Alabama. that is a guy that fits in perfectly to the current system and the current need to contend for the Denver Broncos. As for Miami, I don't think that there's really much to discuss. This video isn't going to be a lot more of a deep dive into Miami. They're obviously rebuilding. They just signed Malik Willis. Obviously, if you're Malik Willis, it's tough to see that your number one option is leaving you. But now they have 2 picks within the first round, which they desperately need because they do have a ton of dead cap on the board. Jeff Hafley is taking a big time risk, and it clearly, shows me that the Dolphins front office potentially has a lot of patience with Jeff Hafley because they're not putting him in a good position early on to go out and want to succeed. This is going to be a long-term rebuild. They have a ton on their books right now. They don't have a lot to that receiving room. Achane has dealt with some injury. The offensive line still needs to be rebuilt. It's clear to me that they are trying to fill out that defensive side possibly more and then begin to work. I just dropped my mic, and then begin to work on the offense after that. It's just tough because you're just not giving Malik Willis and Hafley a lot to work with. There's not a lot of talent on that roster right now, and you're having to potentially find ways in areas like the draft where there's just not a lot of talent there overall either. So we'll see what happens. It's clear it's a full rebuild at this point for Miami, and they must be having some patience with their new head coach because this move now, to me, makes this a heck of a lot longer for them to potentially get back to the top of the AFC. But let me know what you guys think about all of that down below in the comment section. What was your dang reaction to this move this morning? What do you think about it? Winner, loser? Thoughts on Waddle going to the Broncos? Thoughts on the Dolphins getting rid of Waddle? Who could the Dolphins potentially draft? Did the Broncos make the right move? Yada, yada, yada. Do I need to continue to shut my mouth about Sean Payton and quit criticizing him? Maybe I should keep criticizing him because then after that, he continues to prove me wrong. I love you, Sean Payton. I love George Payton. I love the Broncos franchise. You guys continue to keep me on my toes and continue to make exceptional moves. I just want the best for this team moving forward, and I want to see them win a dang Super Bowl because I think they can do it. That is why I make these videos and analyze. But answer all of those questions down below, as well as subscribe to the channel, leaving a like on this video and sharing it with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will also never forget for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, I will see you guys on the next one. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. And peace.